I paid for the flowers, the 5-tier cake, and the ballroom overlooking the bay. And then, I sat at home in my slippers while they said, "I do." Yes, you heard that right. My own son didn't invite me to his wedding. The same son I raised on second-hand shoes and tuna casseroles. The same boy I stayed up with during his asthma nights. The same man I worked double shifts for so he could go to college debt-free. And now? He said I'd make his fiancée uncomfortable, because I always have opinions. So they left me off the guest list. But not off the invoice. This is the story of how I paid for a wedding I wasn't welcome at. And what I did afterward that none of them saw coming. Stay till the end to see what I did. My name is Margaret Ann Whitaker, and I've lived in the same 2-bedroom house in Charleston, South Carolina for over 45 years. It has creaky hardwood floors, floral wallpaper I put up in the 80s that's peeling at the edges, and a front porch swing James, my late husband, built before he passed. The kind of house that smells faintly of lemon oil, vanilla candles and old memories. I'm 74 now. Retired with thinning silver hair I curl every Saturday out of habit, and knees that ache when it rains. But back then, when I was just a mother in her 30s, I was everything to my son. His name is Nathaniel. He used to call me Mama. Before he learned it sounded too Southern. Then I became Mom. Later, just Margaret, when he wanted to sound professional around his college friends. I raised him alone after James died in '94. It wasn't easy. I worked nights cleaning office buildings, scrubbing bathrooms and picking gum off carpets while other people went home to their families. I packed his lunch every morning, peanut butter and jelly cut into stars, and made sure he had a clean shirt for school, even if it meant I wore the same blouse 3 days in a row. Nathaniel was smart. Too smart, sometimes. He won spelling bees, corrected my grammar, read Shakespeare by 10. I was so proud. I used to keep every ribbon, every certificate, pressed in a photo album I called Proof. I still have it. When he got into Duke University, I cried on the kitchen floor. Not because he was leaving, but because I'd saved just enough over 18 years of cafeteria work and night janitor shifts to pay his first-year tuition outright. He never knew. I told him he'd gotten a scholarship. Let him feel like he earned every cent. And he did, in his own way. Nathaniel graduated with honors. Went off to New York, then Chicago, now San Francisco. Works in finance. Talks about markets and equity and numbers I can't follow anymore. I see him maybe twice a year, Easter and Christmas if I'm lucky. Phone calls got shorter. Texts more sparse. But I told myself it was just how busy people are these days. I always made excuses for him. Even when he forgot my birthday. Even when he sent a Christmas card addressed to Margaret Whitaker instead of Mom. Even when I found out, through Facebook, no less, that he was engaged. I still remember the first time I heard her name. Chelsea. She was tagged in a photo of the two of them at some vineyard in Napa. She wore one of those hats you see in magazines. All wide-brimmed and impractical. Her smile looked perfect. Her nails matched her wine glass. Nathaniel looked smaller next to her. They got engaged 6 months later. I found out when his cousin Emily forwarded me an Instagram post with the caption. She said yes, ring kiss marked. I stared at the screen for a long time. No phone call. No letter. No, Mom, I'm getting married. But I didn't get angry. Not then. Instead, I went to the kitchen, pulled out the blue envelope I kept tucked in the back of the pantry. The one with the savings I'd never touched. Inside, $24,300. It was meant to be for something special. I'd always imagined using it to visit Paris, or to renovate the bathroom, or maybe just to leave something behind for Nathaniel when I passed. But then I thought, maybe this is the moment. Maybe this is how I can show him I still believe in him, in his future, in love. So I called him. He didn't answer the first few times, but eventually, He called back. "Hi, Mom," he said. "I'm kinda in the middle of something." I told him I'd seen the news, that I was happy for him, that if he needed help with the wedding I could contribute. He paused, just for a second, then he said, "That's really generous of you. I mean, Chelsea's family is already covering the photography and catering. We were struggling with the venue deposit, though." I told him I'd send a check. No questions asked. He didn't say, "Thank you." Not then. But I still mailed the envelope that Friday. Handwritten. Certified. Signature required. He signed for it. I know because I kept the delivery confirmation. Weeks went by. Then months. No invitation came. No save the date. No mother of the groom dress suggestions. Not even a group email. I waited. Silently. Embarrassed to even ask. It wasn't until Emily, God bless her honesty, called and said, "Aunt Margaret, I heard you weren't going. I thought maybe you were sick or something." That's when it hit me. They hadn't forgotten. They had excluded me. On purpose. I hung up the phone, sat in my kitchen, listened to the clock tick past midnight. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not out of heartbreak. Not out of shame. But out of something colder. Realization. That my love had become something inconvenient to my son. Something that didn't fit the new image he'd built for himself. I was no longer the woman who raised him. I was just the name on a check. 3 days after Emily called, I finally worked up the courage to send Nathaniel a message. It wasn't angry. Just simple. "Hi, sweetheart. Just wondering if the wedding invitations went out yet? I want to make sure mine didn't get lost in the mail." No response. Not that day. Not the next. It wasn't until nearly a week later that he finally replied. "Hey, Mom. So, Chelsea and I talked, and we decided to keep the ceremony small. Just really close friends and immediate family. Hope you understand." I stared at those words like they were in a foreign language. "Just immediate family," he said. I sat in that kitchen chair so long, the wood pressed into the backs of my thighs. I was his mother, who had raised him, alone, who had bought his first shoes and kissed every scraped knee, who had sold her wedding ring to pay for his calculus tutor, who had sent a check for $24,000, and wasn't considered immediate family. My hand shook so hard I spilled tea on the tablecloth, the one I embroidered back in 1985. And I remember, Nathaniel was 6, and had come home crying because someone at school said his dad was dead. He'd crawled into my lap, snot and tears soaking into my apron, and whispered, "Do we still count as a family if it's just us?" I'd hugged him tighter than I ever had and said, "We are more family than most, because we fight for each other." Where had that little boy gone? I didn't tell anyone. Not right away. I didn't want pity. I didn't want people clucking their tongues and saying, "Kids these days." Or worse, "What did you do wrong?" So I kept busy. I baked, cleaned out the attic, alphabetized my spice rack, started knitting again, even though arthritis pinched my fingers. But the silence roared louder each day. Especially when Chelsea posted their bridal shower photos on Instagram. There she was, in a white lace dress surrounded by flowers and friends, popping champagne in front of a gold balloon arch. Nathaniel stood beside her, holding a gift box with bride and groom, etched in silver script. I clicked through the photos. Clicked again. And then I saw my tablecloth. The very same embroidered linen I'd given Nathaniel when he moved into his first apartment, one he never acknowledged. There it was, spread out on a buffet table beneath charcuterie boards and sparkling cider. She'd used it without asking, without even knowing what it meant. Part of me broke. Not from anger. From the sheer smallness I felt. Like I was being slowly erased, piece by piece. A week before the wedding, a letter arrived. Not an invitation. An invoice. From the venue. It was addressed to me. Because the original reservation had been made under my name. Apparently, Nathaniel had never updated the contact. And they were asking for the final balance, another $3,200, to be paid by Friday. I called the venue in a daze. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. If the account is under your name, ma'am, we can't release liability unless your son submits a new contract. I hung up. Then I called Nathaniel. He didn't pick up. I called again, and then again 10 times in a row. He finally answered. Mom, he said, irritated. I'm in a tasting with the caterer. I just got an invoice from the venue, I said, cutting him off. They say I still owe them $3,000. Long pause. Yeah, he said slowly. So, Chelsea's parents were supposed to cover that, but there was a miscommunication. A miscommunication? We thought you'd be okay covering the rest. I mean, you already started the payments. I swallowed hard. You never even invited me, Nathaniel. Silence. He exhaled. Look, Mom, it's not personal. Chelsea she has a complicated relationship with her own mother, and she wanted to keep things drama-free. Drama-free. My voice cracked. You think I would cause drama? He didn't answer. I raised you alone. I gave you everything I had. And now you want my money, but not my presence. Mom, please don't make this harder than it is. No, I said, voice shaking. You already made it hard. I'm just finally seeing it clearly. I hung up. Then I sat there stunned, shaking. And then I got angry. Not the kind of angry that explodes, but the kind that rises slowly, like hot air in a sealed room. The kind that says, enough. That night I pulled out an old photo album, flipped through page after page of birthdays, report cards, Halloween costumes I'd sewn by hand, one of Nathaniel in his Batman cape, one of me, kneeling beside him with my arm around his shoulder. I held that photo like it was a piece of my own skin. Then I stood up, walked to my little secretary desk and pulled out a pen. I wrote one letter to the venue, revoking my payment authorization, and another to Nathaniel. It wasn't long. Just 10 sentences. You are still my son. I will always love you. But love does not mean endless giving. I taught you strength, not entitlement. I taught you loyalty, not convenience. I taught you presence, and you gave me absence. You may choose who you marry, but you do not choose to rewrite me out of your life. I deserve dignity. I deserve to be more than a wallet with a last name. So this is me drawing a boundary. You may keep the tablecloth. You may keep your new world. But you will not keep my silence. Then I folded it. Slipped it in an envelope. Didn't send it yet, but left it by the front door. And I finally slept through the night. 3 days after I mailed the letter, the silence remained. No call. No text. I wasn't expecting one anymore. But then an email came. From someone I never thought I'd hear from. Chelsea. The subject line. I think you deserve to know the truth. I clicked it with shaking hands. The message began. Margaret. I know this may feel strange, but I hope you'll read this with an open heart. I'm not writing to justify what happened, only to explain it. She went on to say that when she and Nathaniel first got engaged, she was excited to meet me. She'd asked about me many times. But Nathaniel always changed the subject. He told her I was overbearing, old-fashioned, too involved. That I'd make everything about me. That I'd judge her for not being good enough. Chelsea said she believed him. And so, when he suggested not inviting me, she didn't push back. I regret that now, she wrote. Because last week I saw the receipts. The payments came from you. Not his father's inheritance. Not our savings. You. She confronted Nathaniel. At first, he told her it was just a gesture, that I'd insisted. But then she saw the emails. The ones where he sent her father my routing number. Where he tried to frame the money as part of his contribution. And then, she told me something I didn't expect. Asterisk. I asked him why he never talks about you. Why you weren't part of our wedding even though you helped build it. He got defensive. Angry. And finally, he said something I can't unhear. My mother is a reminder of a life I don't want anymore. Asterisk. I stopped reading. I closed the laptop. I sat in that same wooden chair where I used to feed him Cheerios and wipe his chin. And I stared out the window for a very long time. That night I didn't cry. Something had shifted. Some knot inside me loosened. Because for the first time, I understood. This wasn't about me being unlovable. This wasn't about me not being enough. It was about Nathaniel. And his shame. He wasn't ashamed of me. He was ashamed of where he came from. Of the woman who scrubbed toilets so he could wear designer shoes. Of the small house with chipped paint and photo albums made of duct-taped pages. Of the woman who raised him to be strong, but who he chose to see as weak. And now? He was trying to erase it all. But here's the thing. You can run from your roots. You can try to reinvent yourself. But the ground remembers. And so do the people who loved you before you knew how to love yourself. 2 days later, Chelsea called me. Her voice was small. She apologized, not in that plastic, performative way people do, but the kind that trembles with sincerity. You didn't deserve any of this, she said. I didn't argue. She was right. Then she said something I wasn't ready for. I'm not sure I can marry someone who treats his mother like this. That stunned me. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. For the first time. I saw Chelsea not as a polished stranger with matching nail polish and Instagram filters, but as a young woman caught in a story she didn't fully write. Whatever you decide, I told her, do it with your whole heart, not out of fear, and not out of shame. She cried. We talked for over an hour, not about Nathaniel, about life, about our mothers. About the recipes she wanted to learn someday. She asked if I'd ever consider sharing some of mine. I said yes. That weekend I got another email. This time from the venue. Your payment authorization has been revoked. The outstanding balance is now under the responsibility of the groom. Thank you. That same day, a courier dropped off a box at my doorstep. Inside, my tablecloth. Freshly laundered, pressed, folded, and a handwritten note. I'm sorry. I see you now. I see what he refused to. You deserve to be honored, not hidden. Chelsea. The wedding still happened. They didn't cancel it. But something changed. Emily called me afterward and said Chelsea made a toast. Not about the future, but about the people who shaped her husband's past. And she named me, out loud, said I was the reason Nathaniel was standing there at all, that I had paved a path no one saw, and that the wedding stood on my foundation. Apparently the room went quiet, and then people clapped. Nathaniel, I heard, looked down at his shoes. He didn't clap, but I didn't need him to. Not anymore, because the truth had finally been spoken. And once the truth is out, it doesn't go back in the box. It wasn't until 3 weeks after the wedding that Nathaniel finally called. Not texted. Not emailed. Called. It was a Thursday. Late afternoon. The sun was cutting sideways through my kitchen blinds, painting long gold lines on the counter where I'd been slicing peaches for a cobbler. The phone rang. I saw his name flash across the screen, Nathaniel Whitaker. And for a brief moment I thought, don't pick up. But I did. Mom, he said. Not hi. Not how are you. Just Mom, followed by a long pause. I let the silence stretch. I guess you heard Chelsea gave a speech at the wedding, he said flatly. I did, I answered. Another pause. I didn't know she was going to do that, he added. She blindsided me. She told the truth, I said. Truth isn't a surprise, Nathaniel. It's only uncomfortable if you've been avoiding it. He sighed. That exasperated, polished sigh I'd heard 100 times on his voicemails. The one he used with interns, waiters, and now his mother. I didn't call to argue. Why did you call? He hesitated. I wanted to clear the air. Start fresh. I laughed. Not mockingly, just small. Sud. Start fresh? After you tried to rewrite me out of your wedding? After you took my money, erased my name, and called me a reminder of a life you didn't want? He didn't answer. I could hear a car horn in the background. Maybe he was outside. Maybe pacing. Maybe wishing he'd never made the call. You know, I said slowly. I thought I'd raised a man. Excuse me? His voice sharpened. I raised a boy who knew compassion, who watched me clean floors for 12 hours and still asked if I wanted help with the dishes. A boy who wrote me Mother's Day cards in crayon and made me tea when I was sick. A boy who saw people, really saw them. What does that have to do with? It has everything to do with it, I cut in. Because somewhere along the way, that boy disappeared. Replaced by someone who thinks decency is transactional. Who measures worth by social ease and polished facades. Who throws away the people who built him the minute they don't match the curated version of his life. You don't understand, he snapped. You never understood. You always wanted everything to be sentimental, dramatic. I was trying to protect Chelsea. Protect myself. Protect yourself from what? I asked, my voice quiet. From being seen as the son of a janitor? A woman who made too much noise loving you? No, he said, but it was too quick. Too defensive. Yes, I said. You're ashamed of me. He didn't argue. And that silence was my answer. For a moment neither of us spoke. The hum of my refrigerator filled the space between words. Then I said, I'm not angry anymore. He sounded surprised. You're not? No, I said. Because I finally see you clearly. And clarity doesn't leave room for anger. Only grief. What's that supposed to mean? It means I mourn the son I thought I raised. The man I believed you'd grow into. The kind of man who'd walk into his wedding and look around the room and say, Where's my mother? He exhaled sharply. This is ridiculous. You think you're the victim here, but you're always trying to make things about you. No, I said softly but firmly. I made your life about you. Every hour I worked. Every dollar I saved. Every night I stayed up sewing buttons back on your shirts instead of sleeping. That wasn't about me. That was love. And love, Nathaniel, doesn't need a spotlight. But it deserves a seat at the table. I heard it then, that fragile crack in his breath. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered. But you did. Silence again. Then he asked the question I wasn't ready for. Is there any way back from this? I closed my eyes. Could I forgive? Yes. I already had, in some way. But forget? No. Because forgetting meant erasing myself the way he tried to. You want to come back from this? I asked calmly. Then don't ask for forgiveness like it's a reset button. Show me. Show me with presence. With truth. With choices. He didn't reply right away. Then he said, Chelsea's pregnant. I blinked. She told me 2 days ago, he continued. I haven't told anyone yet. You're the first. I didn't know what to say. A grandchild. Another little life. Another chance. I don't want to make the same mistakes, he said quietly. But I don't know how to fix this. I breathed in. Let the stillness settle between us. Then I said, then stop looking at fixing as undoing. Start looking at it as building forward. He was crying. I could hear it now. Not loud. Not performative. Real. Broken. I'm sorry, he said again. This time truly. I know, I replied. And I hope someday you'll show that child the photo albums you left behind. I hope you'll say this was your grandmother. She didn't have much, but she gave me everything. He said nothing, and somehow that said everything. We didn't hang up with a resolution. There were no dramatic declarations. No I love yous neatly tied with a bow. But the next day a box arrived. Inside was a hardcover photo album. On the front it read, "Proof." The same word I had written on the duct tape spine of the old one. Inside, Nathaniel had printed and placed photos from our past, scanned from the dusty albums I once kept in my closet. There was me, holding him on his 5th birthday. Him riding a tricycle down our cracked driveway. Me in my work uniform, holding a thermos and smiling into the sun. On the last page was a photo I hadn't seen before. A picture of him and Chelsea. From their wedding. They were standing at the edge of the venue lawn, backs to the camera. Chelsea was holding her bouquet. Nathaniel was looking toward the sea. And beside them, an empty white chair. Tied to the back of the chair was a small sign. It read, "Reserved for the woman who made this day possible. My mother." I didn't cry. I just held the album to my chest and whispered, "That's a start." 3 months later, I was back on the front porch, rocking slowly on the swing James built, when the letter arrived. It wasn't from Nathaniel. It was from Chelsea. Handwritten. Neatly folded. Lavender ink. Inside was a photograph, a sonogram, and a note. "Dear Margaret, she's due in March. A little girl. I hope she has your strength. We'd like to name her and after you. If you're willing, I would love for you to be in her life. With love, Chelsea." I sat with that letter for a long time. I ran my finger over the curve of that tiny spine in the sonogram, and I whispered, "Welcome to the world, Anne. You're already so loved." I didn't cry. Not in the way I used to, the kind of tears that came from being discarded, unseen, silenced. This was different. A quiet kind of warmth. A recognition that I had not been erased. I had been misunderstood. But now I was remembered. In the weeks that followed, Nathaniel started calling gently, cautiously. First it was once a week. Then twice. He never pretended things were perfect. He didn't try to rewrite what happened. Instead he listened. He told me about doctor appointments, baby names, nursery colors. He asked me for the banana bread recipe again. The one with nutmeg and brown sugar crust, because Chelsea was having cravings and said, "Only your mom's version will do." One day, he asked if I still had the baby blanket I'd knitted when he was born. I did. Blue and cream, with his initials stitched in tiny block letters. I mailed it to them, along with a new one I'd started the moment I read Chelsea's letter. This one in pale lilac and warm gold. For Anne. Then came the day Nathaniel said, "We're flying in next month." I nearly dropped the phone. To Charleston. Yeah. Just for a few days. Chelsea wants to see where I grew up. I swallowed. "Where will you be staying?" I was hoping, if it's not too much trouble, at home. Home. He said it like it still was. Surprised me how quickly I said yes. They arrived on a chilly November morning. I stood on the porch in my thick cardigan, hair pinned up, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold from nervous waiting. When they pulled up, I froze for a second, until the car door opened and Chelsea stepped out. 6 months pregnant, cheeks rosy, smiling wide. She walked right up and hugged me. Not politely. Fully. Warmly. "Mom," she whispered. I blinked, then hugged her tighter. Nathaniel came around slowly. He looked older than I remembered. Not in a tired way, just less guarded. He gave me a hesitant smile. I opened my arms. He leaned in. That embrace was not theatrical. Not picture perfect. But it was real. And real was enough. For 3 days the house was full again. I taught Chelsea how to make cornbread dressing from scratch. We strung lights on the porch. Nathaniel fixed the broken gate James never got around to. At night, we drank chamomile tea and looked through old photo albums. Chelsea teared up at a picture of Nathaniel at age 3, in a duck costume I made from yellow felt. "You did all this alone?" she asked. I just smiled. She squeezed my hand. "And is lucky to have you." I didn't say anything. Just whispered a prayer in my heart that I'd live long enough to tell her all the stories this house still holds. On their last night, Nathaniel came out onto the porch where I was knitting. He sat beside me. We rocked in silence for a while. Then he said, "I've been going to therapy." I nodded. "Good." He looked down at his hands. "I used to be so angry at the world. At you. At Dad for dying. I wanted to escape everything that reminded me of who I used to be." "I know," I said. "I thought success meant cutting off the parts that hurt. That felt poor. That made me feel small. I didn't see that those were the very parts that made me whole." I didn't interrupt. He turned toward me, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Mom. For the years I made you feel invisible. For the wedding. For all of it. I forgive you," I said simply. He started to speak again, but I stopped him with a hand on his. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Nathaniel. It means I'm choosing to love you with my eyes open." He nodded. We sat there a while longer. The wind rustled through the trees. A car passed in the distance. Somewhere a neighbor's dog barked. He leaned his head on my shoulder. And just like that I got my boy back. Not the child. Not the polished man in a suit. But the real Nathaniel. The one I raised. The one I always believed was still in there. Under all the silence. When they left the next morning, I packed banana bread, 3 jars of my fig preserves, and a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties for Anne. Chelsea hugged me again, lingering. Nathaniel promised, "We'll be back." And this time I believed him. Now I wait. Not in the way I used to, not with desperation, but with peace. I still live in my little Charleston house. Still keep James's picture by the bed. Still have my embroidered tablecloth folded in the hutch. But there's a new photo on the mantel now. It's a framed print of the sonogram, next to a card that reads, "To Grandma and we can't wait to meet you." Sometimes I walk past it, smile and whisper, "You'll know who I am, little one." I promise you that. Because legacies are not built in grand gestures. They're built in banana bread. In porch swings. In stories passed down while folding laundry. And in the decision, the fierce, unwavering decision to love anyway. Sometimes, the deepest heartbreak doesn't come from betrayal. It comes from being forgotten. By the very people you once built your world around. For a long time, I thought love meant giving without limit. Staying silent to keep the peace. Swallowing pain so that others wouldn't feel guilty. But I've learned something. Love without boundaries becomes erasure. And silence in the face of disrespect is not grace, it is abandonment of the self. I still love my son. And now he's beginning to love me again. Not as a background figure, not as a benefactor, but as a woman. A mother. A human being who deserved a seat at the table. Forgiveness doesn't always look like hugs and happy endings. Sometimes it looks like truth spoken in calm voices. Sometimes it's mailed in a photo album. Sometimes it's a quiet morning, folding tiny socks for a granddaughter who will grow up knowing exactly who I am. And now, I live each day with this quiet promise. I will not disappear. I will not be rewritten. I will not apologize for having given my all. I will love fiercely, but I will not love blindly. So if you're listening to this, sitting alone, perhaps misunderstood, perhaps overlooked, I want to tell you, you matter. Even if they don't say your name. Even if they forget your seat. Even if they take your stories and call them theirs. You are not invisible. You are the roots beneath a family tree that forgot who watered it. And one day, whether by a photo or recipe, a laugh that sounds just like yours, they will remember. And when they do, you'll still be standing, with your story, your dignity, your love unshaken. This moved you. Please subscribe for more true stories of strength, heartbreak, and healing. Your support helps these voices be heard and remembered. Thank you for listening.